My grandmother's house sold for $340,000. I found out from a stranger. Not from my husband. Not from my lawyer. Not from a letter or a phone call or even a text message. I found out because I was scrolling through a real estate app on a Sunday afternoon, the way you do when you're bored and daydreaming, and I saw the listing marked sold, and something in my chest turned to ice. Because I recognized the address. Because that house was mine. Because my husband had sold it without telling me. And that was just the beginning. Let me tell you about my grandmother first. Because without her, none of this makes sense. Her name was Evelyn. Evelyn May Porter. She was born in 1941 in a small town in Tennessee, the daughter of a sharecropper, and she built her life the way people of her generation built things, slowly, stubbornly, with her hands and her silence and an absolute refusal to be defeated by anything the world threw at her. She moved north at 19. Worked in a factory. Went to night school. Married my grandfather, who died young, and raised 3 children on her own without ever once asking anyone to feel sorry for her. The house on Clover Lane, a 4-bedroom craftsman with a big porch and a garden she had tended for 50 years, she had paid for herself. Dollar by dollar. It was the physical proof of her life's work. The thing she could point to and say, I made this. Nobody gave this to me. When she passed away 3 years ago, she left the house to me. Not to my mother. Not to my aunts. To me, her youngest grandchild, the one who had spent every summer on that porch, learning to braid from her patient hands and listening to her talk about life with the particular directness of someone who had earned the right to say exactly what she meant. She left it to me with one instruction, written in her will in her careful, slanted handwriting. Don't let anyone take this from you, baby girl. I should have listened harder. My name is Naomi. I am 36 years old. I have been married to Derek for 8 years. Or I was. Past tense. I'll get to that. Derek was charming when I met him. The kind of charming that feels like warmth at first, that makes you feel seen and chosen and lucky. He had big plans and easy confidence and a way of talking about the future that made everything feel possible. What I didn't understand then, and what took me years of slowly mounting evidence to accept, was that Derek's confidence was not built on capability. It was built on access. Access to other people's money. Other people's resources. Other people's patience. Starting with mine. In 8 years, he had started 4 businesses. All 4 had failed. Not because the ideas were bad, some of them were genuinely decent, but because Derek had a fundamental allergy to the kind of sustained, unglamorous work that turns ideas into actual functioning things. He was extraordinary at the launch. Terrible at the follow-through. Each failure had cost us. I had covered losses with my salary. I'm an occupational therapist, steady work, good income but not lavish. I had watched savings accounts drain. I had nodded through conversations where Derek explained, with great conviction, why the next thing would be different. I had loved him. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't been in something like this. I had genuinely loved him. And love makes you patient in ways that, in hindsight, look indistinguishable from blindness. The house on Clover Lane I had kept separate. Deliberately. My grandmother's lawyer had structured the inheritance in a way that kept it in my name only, and I had left it that way, not out of distrust of Derek exactly, but out of something quieter. A protective instinct I hadn't fully examined. That house was the one thing that was entirely mine. Or so I thought. The Sunday I found out, Derek was in the living room watching football. I walked in from the kitchen with my phone in my hand and my heart doing something violent in my chest, and I stood in the doorway and looked at him, this man I had built a life with, this man who had slept beside me for 8 years, and I said, very quietly, Derek. Did you sell Grandma Evelyn's house? He looked up from the screen. And in the half-second before he composed his face into something neutral, I saw it. He knew. What? He said. The house on Clover Lane, I said. It's listed as sold. $340,000. Did you sell it? He muted the television. That was actually what got me, the deliberateness of it. He reached for the remote and muted it like we were about to have a reasonable conversation about something ordinary. Naomi, he started. Did you sell my grandmother's house? I said. Each word separate. Each one controlled. A pause. Long enough to tell me everything. I had power of attorney, he said. From when you gave it to me during your surgery 2 years ago. The paperwork was technically still. Where is the money? The question came out at a volume I hadn't planned. Milo, our dog, irrelevant to this story but present, scrambled off the couch and left the room. Smart dog. Derek looked at me with an expression that was trying to be calm and not quite managing it. It went into the business, he said. The new venture. Naomi, this is going to be the one that. You sold my dead grandmother's house, I said. The house she left me. The house that was in my name. And you put the money into your business. Our business, he said. I'm doing this for us. Stop talking, I said. He stopped. I stood there in the doorway of my own living room and I felt something move through me that I had never felt before. Not rage exactly, though there was rage in it. Something older and colder and more structural than rage. It was the feeling of a decision being made. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I did not cry, not in front of him. I walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed, and called my sister Renee. Renee picked up on the first ring. He sold the house, I said. Silence. Then? Evelyn's house? Yes. A sharp intake of breath. Naomi. How? Power of attorney from my surgery. He used it. $340,000 into his new business venture. The silence on the other end was the specific silence of someone trying very hard not to say the first 17 things that come to mind. Listen to me, Renee said finally. Her voice had gone very calm. Renee gets calm when things are serious. It used to scare me when we were kids. Right now it was the most comforting sound I'd ever heard. Do not talk to him anymore tonight. Do not tell him what you're thinking. Do not give him any information. Do you hear me? Yes, I said. Is the power of attorney document in the house? Yes. In the filing cabinet. Get it. Get your passport, your birth certificate, your social security card, and every financial document you can put your hands on tonight. Put them in your car. Then call Marcus. Marcus was our cousin. He was also a family law attorney. I did exactly what Renee said. Marcus answered his phone at 10:30 on a Sunday night without irritation, listened to me explain everything in one long barely punctuated rush, and then said, Okay. First question, do you want to save the marriage or end it? The answer was already inside me. It had been forming since the moment I'd seen that sold listing. Maybe before that. Maybe it had been forming for years, in all the quiet places where I had watched Derek's promises dissolve and covered his failures with my patience and my paycheck. End it, I said. Second question, Marcus said. The power of attorney he used, was it specifically limited to medical decisions during your recovery? It was supposed to be. Supposed to be meaning you're not sure what document he had you sign? My stomach dropped. I signed a lot of things before the surgery. I was scared and distracted and he handled the paperwork. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Send me everything you have tonight. I'll look at it first thing tomorrow. But Naomi, If that power of attorney was limited to medical decisions and he used it to conduct a real estate transaction, that sale may be legally challengeable. I gripped the phone. Challengeable meaning? Meaning potentially reversible, he said. Or at minimum, meaning he committed fraud. I slept in the guest room that night. Derek knocked on the door at 11 and said my name through the wood. I said nothing. He said he wanted to explain. He said I didn't understand the full picture. He said if I would just let him show me the projections. Go to bed, Derek, I said. He went. I lay in the dark with my phone on my chest and I thought about my grandmother. About her hands. About the way she used to sit on that porch in the evening and watch the garden like it was something she was quietly proud of. About the will, and her careful handwriting. Don't let anyone take this from you, baby girl. I'm sorry, Grandma, I whispered. I'm going to fix it. The next 3 weeks were the most exhausting of my life. Marcus was extraordinary. He dug into the power of attorney document and found exactly what he'd suspected. It had been written specifically for medical and healthcare decisions during my recovery from a uterine fibroid surgery in 2022. It explicitly excluded financial and real estate transactions. Derek had used it anyway. The real estate attorney who had processed the sale had not looked closely enough. The buyer, a property development company, had purchased the house in good faith, which complicated things. But Derek's use of a limited, medically specific power of attorney to conduct a $340,000 real estate transaction was, as Marcus put it, not a gray area. It was fraud. And here is where the first twist came in. The twist I hadn't seen coming. When Marcus began pulling financial records for the divorce proceedings, he found something else. Derek's new business venture, the one he had claimed the house money went into? It barely existed. There was a registered LLC. There was a website. There were a handful of transactions. But of the $340,000 from the sale of Grandma Evelyn's house, Marcus could only account for roughly $80,000 of it in any business-related capacity. The other $260,000? Gone. Marcus called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in between patient sessions at work, sitting in my car in the parking lot, eating a granola bar. Naomi, he said. I need you to stay calm. That's never a sentence that makes anyone calm, I said. Fair point. I'm going to ask you something and I need you to think carefully before you answer. In the last 2 years, have you noticed any changes in Derek's habits? New phone? Working late with no clear reason? Unexplained trips? The granola bar went back into my bag. I thought about the last 2 years. About the business trips to conferences I hadn't been invited to. About the second cell phone I'd seen once in his jacket pocket and he'd said was a work phone. About the restaurant charge on our joint account, a restaurant I'd never been to, that he'd said was a client dinner. Yes, I said slowly. Yes to all of those. I think the money didn't go into a business, Naomi, Marcus said. I think it went into a person. Her name was Brittany. She was 31. She had been a business consultant Derek had met at a conference 18 months ago, which, I later understood, was not actually a business conference. She lived in a city 2 hours away. He had been supporting her with my grandmother's money. I want to be honest with you about what I felt when I found this out, because this story is about truth, and the truth is complicated. I felt rage. White, total, structural rage, the kind that doesn't shake, it solidifies. I felt grief. Not for Derek. For the years. For the woman who had been patient and trusting and had covered his failures with her love and her income and her grandmother's legacy. And underneath the rage and the grief, something else. Something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because there is a particular liberation in reaching the moment when there is absolutely nothing left to excuse. I want to tell you what taking everything else actually looked like. Because this title is not clickbait, it is accurate, but it does not mean what you might think. I did not slash tires. I did not make dramatic scenes. I did not blow up his phone or show up at Brittany's apartment. What I did was methodical, legal, and, with Marcus guiding every step, devastatingly effective. First, the fraud case. Marcus filed a civil claim for the unlawful use of the limited power of attorney in a financial transaction. Derek had, unambiguously, forged the scope of his authority. The real estate transaction was challenged. The development company, facing their own legal exposure for insufficient due diligence, negotiated a settlement rather than a full legal battle. It took 4 months. But we recovered $190,000. Not the full amount, but more than half. And because Marcus tied the remaining funds to the divorce proceedings, the judge took a very dim view of a spouse who had committed fraud against a marital partner and then funneled marital assets to a third party. Second, the divorce settlement. Derek had assumed that because he had already moved the most significant asset, the house money, he had protected himself. He had not counted on Marcus. The house we lived in was jointly owned. The investment account we had built together over 8 years, modest, but real, was marital property. Derek's LLC, technically, had assets. Our joint savings had a remaining balance. In a divorce proceeding colored by documented fraud and dissipation of marital assets, the court's inclination was not sympathetic to Derek. I got the house. I got the investment account. I got the remaining joint savings. And Derek got the bill for Marcus's fees, because the judge felt that someone who commits fraud against their spouse should not be rewarded with the other party's legal costs. Third, and this is the part that still gives me a small, quiet satisfaction when I think about it, I wrote a certified letter to the state licensing board for the real estate attorney who had processed the house sale. I documented the inadequate due diligence. I did not pursue punitive action. But I made sure there was a record. Because accountability leaves a trail. And trails matter. The final hearing was on a Thursday morning in October. I wore a green blazer. Not because it meant anything. Just because my grandmother had loved me in green, said it brought out something warm in my face, and I wanted to carry something of hers into the room. When it was over, Marcus walked me out to the courthouse steps and we stood in the cold October sun and he said, "Grandma Evelyn would be proud of you." I had held it together all morning. I did not hold it together then. I cried on the courthouse steps in my green blazer for a solid 4 minutes. Marcus stood next to me and did not say anything, which was exactly right. I want to tell you about the house on Clover Lane. When the settlement funds came through, the $190,000, I did something with the money that I had decided on the very first night, lying in the dark in my guest room. I bought back Grandma Evelyn's house. Not the original house, the development company had already begun renovations. But they had overcalculated their margins and the project had stalled. They were quietly looking to offload it. Marcus found out through a contact. I bought it back for $220,000. $30,000 more than we'd recovered. I covered the difference with part of the investment account from the divorce settlement. It needed work. The development company had stripped some of the original details, the wood trim in the hallway, the built-in shelving in the living room. The garden had been completely cleared. I did not care. I called my aunts. I called my mother. I called Renee. I told them what I had done and I told them I wanted to restore it, not to what it was exactly, but to what it should be. Something that honored Grandma Evelyn without pretending time hadn't passed. We spent 6 weekends working on that house together. My aunt brought photographs from the 60s and 70s so we could reference the original details. My mother found a carpenter who could replicate the built-in shelving. Renee and I replanted the garden, not from memory but from a list I had found in my grandmother's handwriting in an old journal my mother had kept, every plant she'd ever grown, with notes about what did well in morning sun and what needed the afternoon shade. On the last weekend, when we were almost done, my mother found something in the back of a closet that the development company had missed. A small wooden box. Inside it was a bundle of letters tied with kitchen string. And sitting on top of the letters, folded carefully, was a piece of paper in my grandmother's handwriting. It said, "For Naomi, when she's ready. The house is just a house. What it holds is you. Don't forget that no matter what happens to the walls, the real thing, the important thing, is what you carry inside them. I love you more than you know. Grandma Evelyn." I sat down on the floor of that closet and I held that piece of paper for a long time. And then I did what she would have done. I got up. I went back to work. And I finished what I started. I am going to tell you where things stand now, because real stories don't end with courthouse steps and they don't end with found letters. I live in the house on Clover Lane half the year. I rent it to my cousin and her family the other half, at a rate that is fair and that she can actually afford, because that is what Grandma Evelyn would have done with it. Derek and I have not spoken since the final hearing. I do not wish him harm. I also do not think about him very much. That is, I think, the truest form of getting over something, not hating it, just becoming genuinely indifferent to it. I am not currently in a relationship. I am not currently looking for one. I am, for the first time in a very long time, in a period of my life that belongs completely to me. I work with my patients. I tend the garden on Clover Lane. I call Renee too much, and she never complains. I have learned, slowly and imperfectly, to trust my instincts, the protective instinct that had told me to keep the house and my name alone, the deeper instinct I hadn't listened to soon enough that had known something was wrong long before a real estate app confirmed it. I listen to that instinct now. There is something I want to say before I finish. My grandmother wrote, "Don't let anyone take this from you, baby girl." I didn't protect it the way she meant. I was betrayed. The house was taken. But here is what I know now that I didn't know then: what she was really protecting wasn't the property. She was protecting something she recognized in me. A capacity for fight. A refusal to be permanently defeated. The thing she had built her whole life out of. You can take a house from someone. You can take money. You can take years, and trust, and the particular peace that comes from believing in the person next to you. But you cannot take the thing underneath all of that. Derek took what he took. And then I got up. And I went and I got it back, not just the money, not just the house, but the understanding of my own strength that I had almost, in 8 years of quiet patience, forgotten I had. That is not something you can sell. That is not something a fraudulent power of attorney can transfer. That belongs to you. It always has. And no one, no matter how charming, no matter how close they sleep to you, no matter how long you've let them define the edges of your life, can ever take it without your permission. Don't give them permission. And if they take it anyway? You know what to do. You go get it back. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're in the middle of something like this right now, get a good lawyer. Know what you've signed. And listen to the voice that tells you something is wrong. It's usually right.